Right, well, hello and welcome to another episode of Retropower Uncut, episode 45, would you believe? There's an awful lot of episodes, but there we go. I'm glad everybody's here and watching again. On my left, we have Project Utah, which has hit a major milestone. You probably got a hint of that we were getting close to it last week. Well, it's now been fired up. The last of the pre-flight checks were done at the end of last week. A couple of little glitches, nothing too major. Did leak checks, nothing leaked. Did pre-checks on everything else. Fired it up, all good. Set the throttle body balance, that's all good now. That was, the usual, bit lumpy to start with. Synchrometer on, checked all, got the balance all set between the throttle bodies. As you would, those unfamiliar, we're using the Genvi Heritage throttle bodies, which appear like Weber DCOE carburetors. So yeah, they're all set up, that all worked well, it's all been fired up, and yeah, it sounds absolutely beautiful. Further progress on Utah is that Richard Stubley, very kindly at Autodesk, has continued his work for us on Utah. In that, you may remember, he previously scanned the rear of the car and scanned our little home handmade foam mock-ups for the rear overriders, and he then cut a test section in aluminium to just check that the fitting technique using a little ball joint that we were that he designed. To be fair, it was very clever. Check that was going to work, which it did. So we're all very good on that front. So he's now proceeded and made those two overriders in machined from solid brass. They're finished, and they're now up with Derby chrome, being chrome plated. So that's quite a nice little process of machining those. You'll be able to have a little look at. So that's where we're at with Utah, and then moving on from that, I'm going to swing round to Mustang, which, as you'll also notice, now has an engine in the engine bay. So we've made a little bit of visual progress on that. We've made quite a lot of progress, but it's a nice chunk, it's a nice little visual milestone having the engine at home in the engine bay. There are a few jobs done in the engine bay to facilitate that going in, jobs that would be more difficult or impossible before to be done after the engine was fitted, most notably the steering box, which needs really to be fitted before the engine goes in. I don't believe it's actually possible with the engine in, but I can't actually remember. I don't think it is. So yeah, the steering box is fitted, steering linkages were all fitted, various bits in the bulkhead fitted that were easier to fit prior to engine. Steering columns fitted. I think the outer sleeve's still got to go onto that. But yeah, another milestone on that is the engine's now at home in the engine bay, and we can carry on progressing with all the other bits that have got to fit around it now. So yeah, that's moving on nicely. And I think that's another little point to pick up on while we're in here is there's some pre-work going on over here. John, who I don't believe has been introduced yet. John, who's over here on the workbench. Say hello, John. Hello. John's now working on, he's our new assembly man. He's working on the engine for the Chevette and fitting it. He's been building the suspension components up, and he's working on getting the engine mounted to the cross member. Trev was helping, Trev and John have been working on that, getting that fitted, getting the gearbox fitted onto it, getting the clutch release mechanism all set, because it's a concentric hydraulic clutch release mech that needs the height of that assembly setting to suit the clutch prior to everything being bolted together. So that's all been put together. I won't go into too much detail on that at the moment, because we'll pick that up in a future episode when that's all actually going into the car. At the moment we're just doing the pre-work in being able to getting all the sub-assemblies ready and together so that they're ready to go when the body shell is ready to go. So moving swiftly along, we'll head next door into the fabrication layer and see what's been progressing in here. I'm racing off into the distance now and leaving Jaguar to get some nice footage as we wander through. A little shot of a lesser spotted Mercedes 250 SL engine bay there with the Bosch inline 6-cylinder mechanical injection pump, which is a rare beastie to see on a petrol application. Quite a unique thing now. So here we are at the Land Cruiser. Scott's been working on some bits that you now can't really see in here and in here, which are the battery compartments. The next step on from, I believe we signed off last week with the heating and ventilation setup in the bulkhead. That's all complete. The inlet ductwork, like a two-piece fabricated aluminium duct that brings the air in from the fan box on the bulkhead, that's all done and complete now. So he's moved on to the battery boxes, which we fabricated to sit behind the rear wheels, into the rear seat boxes, effectively in the back of the car. We're running twin batteries, pretty much as the car originally ran. Rather than trying to find room for one big single, we're running two slightly smaller units. I think they're 075s, but I can't actually remember off the top of my head now. Is it an 075 battery, Scott? I can't actually remember now. I think it is. It's going to tax my memory now. Yeah, 075. We're running two 075 type batteries. So he's fabricated two battery boxes with nice reinforcing swages built into the bottoms of them, and a drainage hole, and then we'll be grommeting the cables into those. They'll be run obviously in parallel, wide up in parallel, in the back of the car. They are fairly structural, they're pretty resilient. They're all fabricated from 2mm steel, so they actually add quite a bit of strength to the rear corners as well. And then they have lids which will be gasketed on from the top, and then they'll vent out through any vent. Obviously they don't need a lot of venting, but the vent will be out through the boxes, so that there's a combined drain and vent in the boxes. So that's where we decided to put the batteries. They'll have stone deflectors on and all that, so they don't get damaged. But as I say, made out of 2mm steel, there shouldn't be too much of a problem there. So moving on from those. Oh, sorry, I'll just go into another little pick up on another little detail. We decided that we wanted to try and carry on the little swages that were pressed into the original panel work, and because of the way the battery boxes sit, the swages on the top are too long. They would end up halfway off the lids or dangerously close to the edge of the lids. It didn't look very neat, so we decided to pick up on the length of these swages on the sides and transfer them onto the top. So Scott's just drawn up a little pair of pieces in CAD, and then CNC plasma cut the parts to make a little press tool. We've covered how we do that before. You CNC cut the parts out of. He's checked the height of the pressing. They're 4mm deep. So he's cut the press tool out of 4mm thick mild steel sheet on the CNC plasma, and then he 5-minute araldite those pressings onto some platens in our fly press. Once they're araldited on, all lined up, then he presses the swages into the panels on that. Those panels are made out of 16 gauge steel, so you can see the sort of effectiveness of it because it's pressed those in very nicely. So yeah, it's a very neat job all in. And we're happy with that. That's basically now finished, other than just opening out the grommet holes. That's basically done. So he's going to be moving on. The next couple of major stages are just trialling all the steering column assembly, which I know he's just initially started having a look at, but tomorrow he'll be having a further look at that. And then also tomorrow we're going to have a bit of a meeting on how we're going to do the fuel tank. We're changing the way that fits. One of the few little bits of rot in the car is in the fuel tank recess in the floor, but we're going to re-profile that recess anyway, so we can put a larger tank with a surge tank incorporated. Because it's now a petrol and it's going to be running fuel injection, we want a little surge tank incorporated, so we're going to modify the floor to have the capability of having a recess built into the tank to act as a surge tank. So that's the next little step forward on that. Marching on from that one, we'll go to CV8, and it's actually, unusually for me, a reasonably brief one on CV8 this week. The major steps forward, we've finished all the valance, that was covered previously. The major work this week has been the radius arms, the radius arm mounts. It's running a Jaguar independent setup. I'll just recap what I've said previously for anybody that's come in partway through this series. The rear suspension is Series Jaguar XJ subframe, so it's actually a Series 3, I believe, but they're much of a muchness. It's basically a Series Jaguar XJ subframe, which originally ran twin coilover shock absorbers and inboard brake discs. We're getting rid of, we're converting to an outboard brake setup, which is what Jaguar did on the late facelifted Jaguar XJS's. However, those rear subframes are A, rare, B, very expensive, and C, actually quite hard to get hold of now. Easier to get hold of is XJ40, X300, X308 rear ends, and the outboard brake uprights are actually the same as the ones on the late XJS. So we just bought a complete X308 rear end. We use the uprights from that, the drive shafts from that, all the outer components from that, and then we use the Series XJ inner components. So that's all now compiled together. But that necessitates a pair of radius arms. The later Jags, the X300s, X308s, and the previous to that, the XJ40s, didn't use a lower radius arm. They used a large cast wishbone, and they did away with the radius arms. However, on this, the early type, they use a radius arm. I think it's primarily to avoid sort of shimmy of the arms, because the bearing, the dimension across the two bearing points on the lower arms is quite narrow. Under hard acceleration, I think you can get some lower arm shimmy, basically some skip on them, and it puts a lot of stress on the bearings on those lower arms. So they run a rubber bushed radius arm. We need to put the mounts on for those. They're pretty important. So we've worked out the dimensions for those, and Tom's been drawing up the parts and then cutting out the parts, templating everything, and then fabricating that in. Been a little bit fiddly. It's quite an awkward bit of fabrication. It'd be a lot easier with the car the other way up, but we can't really do it the other way up because we need it on the jig to get the datums for the parts to be able to fit them. So that's the reason. There'll be a lot of, well, not a lot, there is an amount of finish welding to do once the car can go on a rotisserie, and we can put it the other way up and do that. At the moment, it's all at least tack welded, some of it's finish welded, the bits that we can't then get at once they're boxed in. But that's all done now, so really happy with that. Radius arms can go on, they all fit. That's all at a good stage. So there'll be more jobs next week. We're on to a lot more provisioning tasks next week, provisioning for plumbing. We've got some work to do on the seat mountings and a few other things. But yeah, so watch this space for progress on the CV8. Marching on again, we come to the Morris. And Stu's been working on the Morris. Stu primarily on front end bits, but a little bit further back as well. Primarily, he's made a swaging tool up and swaged the recesses for the front indicators into the front panel. Done a really nice job of that, and cut out the sections for those to fit into. He's been fine-tuning the panel fits on the front. It was all roughed out and it was close, but there was still work required. So he's been finalising the work on the leading edge of the bonnet, a bit of work on the wing to bonnet fits. He's finalised the front panel had a return which hadn't been completed on it. He's completed a return edge on that, finished that and got that to fit nicely. He's been working on the door to wing fits. Again, they were roughed out somewhere near, but they needed a little bit more fettling and fine tuning. They weren't spot on, so he's done that. there was also some pretty dubious, as was the case with these cars in their day, there were some pretty dubious panel fits. Anybody who's worked on one of these would be only too familiar with it. There's some pretty dubious panel fit between the doors and the quarter panels on them from the factory. And they basically sort of fitted the door and then hammered the leading edge of the quarter panel to get an acceptable clearance. It wasn't really what you'd call a nice gap, it was just acceptable clearance. But knocking that panel back meant that it put a varying radius in the front edge of the quarter panel, which I guess you just didn't notice on the original cars. But on this, we want that to be a sort of even radius top to bottom, so he's shrunk. Just not via any particularly special technique, but just using a hammer and a dolly just to squeeze the corner to lose some of the material back onto itself a little bit, to shrink that front edge where the gaps were tight, and at the factory they'd been sort of belled into a bit of a radius. He shrunk that corner and squeezed it onto itself to lose some of the extra material there to get that gap all nice. He's finished off extending the bottom edges of the doors. I think that would have been covered last week, but he's finished off extending the bottom of the doors. We've lengthened the doors so that the customer's request, and I think I would totally agree, it entirely makes sense, that instead of having the separate sill section that finishes the effective height of the door, we've grafted that height into the door itself, so there is no separate sill section forming the bottom line of the car. The actual door goes all the way down and finishes the side of the car itself. So he's done that as well, and he's currently working on door locks because we want to use more modern door mechanisms. There's no anti-burst door locks on these. They've just got the old two-step type door, literally like a domestic door catch on them as standard. And we're not happy. You know, the owner's not happy with that. We're not happy with that. They're not very safe. Originally, I believe they were, I don't know, I've not got personal experience of this, but I would imagine if you hit a hard enough pothole, hard enough in one of these, given how flexible the shells are, I wouldn't be surprised if your door could come open. It would be interesting to see, but I wouldn't be surprised if they could fly open over a really hard pothole. So that'll be gone. We're using a more modern door catch to solve that problem. We're actually mocking up at the minute, but I think they will work. We're going to use mini ones. There are undoubtedly many better options, but we need quite a slim catch to fit within the depth of the door. There's not a lot of depth, they're very thin doors. And anti-burst type door locks that will fit within that thickness of door that also have the ability to be controlled by a central locking motor and not 10 a penny really. They're quite hard to get hold of. I undoubtedly now in the comments on this video there will be a whole stream of people telling me door locks we could have used, but the best one we could think of really was mini. So I've got some second-hand mini ones to try to do the mock-up build with and just get it all together so that we don't mark up new ones, and obviously we'll just get, they're available new, we'll just get new ones for when we finally build the car up after it's all been painted. So yeah, that's where Morris is at. We're progressing nicely. There's still a lot of dry build type work to do on it, but it is moving along. It's moving along very nicely now. We're getting that's certainly heading towards the prep for paint stages now. It's certainly progressing in that direction. And on that subject, we have Chevette, which is finally painted. That's now resplendent in its final black, and it's looking pretty damn good. I'll let the footage speak really rather than me. It's a really nice job. We've got the panels to do yet; they're still to come. We're juggling a couple of jobs in the body shop at the moment, so we're picking up one and putting down another a little bit. But yeah, the Chevette body shell is now all resplendent in final colour, and that's ready because we will be putting the running gear into that imminently. The body panels have all been mocked up on that, bear in mind, at this stage. They've all been on that up to as far as the final epoxy primer coat. So they were only a wet blocking away from their final gaps, i.e. the final gaps are all set. So the fact that the panels aren't with the shell at the moment doesn't really matter from a gaps point of view. We know all that will go back together as intended. So the body shell is now going to progress through and go to assembly so that we can get that rolling, and then that can go to Simpson Race exhausts for the exhaust fabrication work. And in the meantime, we can do the panel prep without the car. Well, finish panel prep, they're almost prepped, but just finish off the panel prep and get them painted. Then as soon as the car's back from Simpson, we can panel it up and finish assembling it. So that's all in hand. And then, yeah, then we'll be back on to further work through the body shop. But on that subject again, you'll also see, I'm not going to there'll be no footage of it this time, but over the coming few weeks, you'll see quite a lot of, we're going to try and feature a few bits of Retropower civil engineering as well, because I've got my builder's hat on as well at the minute. quite a lot, which is why you're not seeing me very much in the workshop work, because we're undertaking quite a significant expansion, and the assembly shop's about to be completely rebuilt and expanded, and you'll see that's all going to be changing quite dramatically. As of next week, we're going to be doing some pretty serious excavation and quite a lot of concrete work in there. We're fitting some in-ground ramps, an inspection pit, amongst other things, new heating, new lighting, and taking out some walls and generally altering things around a little bit in there. And also, for our sins, we've also decided that we're also putting in a different paint booth now. And I was saying new, it's not new, it's second-hand. We looked at the new options, we can't afford that, simply put. So we're putting in a second-hand, but very good, with a few advantages to the setup we have now, paint booth, which will be going into the body shop in our current prep area. And our prep area will be moving to be an enclosed and extracted, fully dust extracted. I mean, we have dust extraction now, but we'll actually be having it so that we have floor-based dust extraction in the prep area, just to keep that a bit nicer and a lot better lighting than we've got now in the prep area. And then the paint booth, as it sits now, which is in the metalwork shop, that'll be going, so the metalwork shop can expand a little bit, and we've got more room around all the vehicles in here to work, because we have too much work for the space available, basically. So watch this space, you'll be able to see some diggers and stuff working. And on that note, I will see you again soon.